and welcome to a new video. My name is Nicole and this is my booktube channel, Galaxy Stories. So today's video is going to be my February wrap-up. I decided to stop making book reviews because they're very time consuming, and for some books I really didn't have that much to say. So I decided that I would try this format. Instead of giving you book reviews, I would tell you my thoughts about the books I read in a month at the end of that month. So we're gonna try it for February and see how this works. In February, I read 5 books. I wanna say, yeah, 5.5. But one of those books I didn't finish, and it's also for a secret video, so we're gonna leave that aside. And again, it isn't finished. It is not yet the end of February as I'm filming this, but still, I'm not sure I will be able to finish it. I might. I don't know. We'll see. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, I read a total of 5 books, and I will tell you what those books are now. So, the first book that I read in February was Chain of Thorns by Cassandra Clare. This is the third and last book in the Last Hour series, part of the Shadowhunters Chronicles. I'm pretty sure everyone of BookTube has heard about the Shadowhunters Chronicles, so I won't get into too many details. It's kind of hard to tell you about this book without getting into spoilers for other Cassandra Clare books because they're also interconnected at this point. Basically, this is another story in the Shadowhunter world. We follow Cordelia Carstairs, James Herondale, Lucy Herondale, Matthew Fairchild as they finish off the Last Hour series. The conflict in London escalates really highly. They fight demons. As per usual, there's a ton of drama, again, as per usual in Shadowhunter novels, because that's why we read them, to be honest. And yeah, I ended up giving this 4 stars, which is a bit low because I usually give Shadowhunter books 5 stars. I had some issues with the plot. There were some plot points which I felt happened too quickly or had no purpose or were useless. Certain character deaths I thought weren't that relevant and they were just there for shock purpose. I really liked about this book that it focused on the growth of several different characters. Relationships improved, characters decided to finally face their problems and do something about them. I loved that. I had come up with a theory about what might happen in this book, and it didn't come true, but on the other hand, I'm quite happy that it didn't, because the route that Cassandra Clare decided to go on was actually pretty nice as well. So I'm not disappointed it didn't happen. Other than that, there wasn't a lot of Magnus Payne in this book, who's my favorite character in the Shadowhunter series, but it was still entertaining and I had a really great time reading it. It hooked me. I was going through a time when I didn't read that many books, and then I was on holiday and this book came out. Finding this book was an adventure in and of itself because this book came on the 31st of January and I finished my entering exams on the 3rd of February, and I decided that I wouldn't order the book because ordering it from the UK is expensive. And I was pretty sure that I'll definitely find it in one shop in the entirety of the Netherlands. Come on. What do you know? When I started looking for it, my plan was to look for it in Waterstones in Amsterdam on the 5th of February. It was sold out. I went to another bookshop in Amsterdam. It was sold out there as well. I barely managed to reserve it at a bookshop in The Hague, and I picked it up the following day. But it was so hard. 2 days later, I managed to find copies of the book in several other places, but when I was specifically looking for it, I couldn't find it. But it was still worth it. It was very enjoyable and it got me back into reading because I was going through kind of a reading slump. So yeah. Anyway, anytime I'm in a reading slump, if I read a Shadowhunter book, I'll probably be hooked up right away. So that's nice, and I really thank that book for it. As for the next book I read was Moriarty the Patriot Volume 3, which has If you don't know about Moriarty the Patriot, Moriarty the Patriot is a manga series. There's also an anime. I haven't watched the anime. I started reading the manga very, very slowly. And yeah, basically, this is a retelling of the Sherlock Holmes stories by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And in these stories, you follow William Moriarty, who is the main character and is supposed to be Moriarty, Sherlock Holmes' arch nemesis. And in this manga series, he and his brother are orphaned and are adopted into a noble family. And when they grow up, they and their adoptive brother decide to fight against the injustices of the class system, punishing the nobles that abuse their status, helping the poor. And they do that by organizing crime and being crime masterminds, especially William Moriarty, who's the main character. In the second volume, you are also introduced to Sherlock Holmes and Watson. And in this way, through Moriarty's perspective, Sherlock Holmes is supposed to be the figurehead who shows the crime that will organized, and that's how the public would be made aware of the terrible actions of the nobles, and Sherlock Holmes would just be sort of the main actor, directed by William Moriarty, which I find is a really interesting dynamic. I really enjoyed it. In the mangas, almost all of the story arcs are supposed to be direct retellings of Sherlock Holmes stories. In this one, you have The Study in Scarlet, which had begun in the end of the second volume, and Hound the Baskervilles. And yeah, I can't really tell you much about it since it's a murder mystery, so I would kind of spoil the plot if I told you what happened. But they're really engaging stories, and I really like them, and I want to read more of them. I also started an anime series, Manga Stray Dogs, and yeah, managing several anime series and mangas at the same time is something that I've done before, but I'm not sure I have the time for right now. Still, we'll see when I read more, but I will keep on reading Moriarty the Patriot because they're really entertaining. The next book I read in the month of February was none other than The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This book is a classic of English literature I had not read before. I wasn't sure if I wanted to read it because from what I had heard about it, it did not have a happy ending. And I do not usually gravitate towards books that do not have a happy ending, but I found this edition while I was looking for Chain of Thorns, and it looked very pretty, and it is really pretty, like with the peacock feathers. It's gorgeous. And I decided to get it and read the story as well. And I actually really enjoyed it. It was beautiful. Now it's one of my favorite classic stories ever. It is, first of all, in my opinion, it is really beautifully written. It's very accessible. The language is not elaborate, sophisticated, but it still story flows nicely in a way, and I really like that. The character of Dorian Gray is really intriguing. He's really fascinating and horrifying to read about at the same time. We see at the beginning he is an 18-year-old boy, highly impressionable young boy who is admired by everyone for his good looks, for his innocence, and then over the time he gradually becomes more and more corrupt. And there's also a very important part of this story, like it's in the title, The Picture of Dorian Gray, is a portrait that a painter had painted of him who was very impressed by Dorian's beauty. And Dorian, after having heard an entire recital that was pages long from another person about how beauty is the only thing that's valuable, and when you are young you're beautiful, but once you get old you're no longer beautiful, so you're no longer valuable and society doesn't like you anymore, he was very deeply marked by that speech. And he made the wish that instead of him growing old, the picture would grow old for him, and he looked just as young as he did the day the picture was finished. And it sort of happens. Only instead of just showing him aging, the picture also incorporated his flaws and his behavior as Dorian started to commit more and more crimes, to act in a frivolous manner. The portrait also changed to show this, and there are several instances where people say, I have heard bad rumors about you, Dorian, but those cannot be true because you do not look like a person who would commit such crimes. And it's actually true, only it's the portrait, and is Dorian's great secret that a portrait actually shows how he truly looks like, is the mirror to his soul. And I don't know, I just really like that whole metaphor. And yeah, gradually Dorian becomes more and more upset by the picture, but also profits off of it. And his life kind of goes downhill from here to the very end, where it can't get much worse. It's very interesting, had a really interesting social commentary on how society values beauty and appearances above actual depth. And I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I don't know why particularly it stood out to me, but it did. And now it's, again, one of my favorite classic books of all time. So yeah, that was obviously a 5-star read. A word of warning. Don't know what I did. Do not read chapter 13 of this book as the clock is striking midnight. Do not. There was a scene in chapter 13 where Dorian confronts the painter who painted the picture and tells him the truth about what happened to the picture. And I don't know how it happened, but I live next to a clock tower. It's pretty big and loud, and it strikes the hour every hour. So, and it has happened before that when I was reading a book or watching a movie and there was some really intense moment or sad moment or traumatizing moment, that the clock would strike midnight. I don't know how it always happened. It has happened for House of the Dragon, for example. That is a really good example where a character died and the episode ended, and just as the screen faded to black, the clock struck midnight, and I was so scared because it was also dark in the room, and I don't know, I was terrified. And that's something that happened with this book as well. I was reading it, and the clock struck midnight just as I got to chapter 13, and Dorian revealed the portrait. It was the first time when he revealed the portrait to another person, and if you read the book, you know what he does afterwards as well. And I read that as the clock struck midnight. Yeah, the sound effects in the Netherlands are really, really cool. What can I say? Next book I read in February was Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I read that book in one evening. Not even one evening, like 2 hours I had finished it. I had just finished A Picture of Dorian Gray, and it was still early in the evening, and I decided I would read Metamorphosis by Franz Kafka. I wasn't planning on reading the entire book, but it's really short, and I didn't have anything else to do, and I got hooked, or at the very least confused, and I wanted to see if there was some resolution to what I was confused about. And I ended up reading the whole book before midnight, and then I had to hurry to do my Duolingo daily Italian lesson, which involved a bear claiming that they were a turtle. And if I was confused after the Metamorphosis, I was confused after that even more. Anyway, if you haven't heard about the Metamorphosis, it is a short story, like 100 pages long, something like that, about a man waking up one morning and discovering that he is a beetle, a giant beetle. His first thought upon waking up is how he was going to manage to get to work, that he was going to be late to work, he's going to miss the train. And then his boss comes to his home, and his family sees him as a huge beetle, and they distance themselves from him. Now he has to live at home. He was the one who brought the money home to his family. He had a younger sister and his parents weren't working anymore, and he was the one that usually provided for the family, and now the family have to provide for themselves and also take care of him. And it really shows how society values individuals based on their ability to work, no matter the circumstances, and how his family, now that they had to take care of him, treated him rather poorly and were upset at him for kind of ruining their lives of being lazy. I guess that was the moral I got from the story. So I didn't get a moral out of the story, it's just that the general story was really confusing. If I were to wake up as a beetle one day, I highly doubt I would have thought about how I get to work and about not missing the 7 o'clock train. Props to Gregor for doing that, but I would not. And then, in the end of the book, the beetle dies. And then, that's the thing I was most confused about. They say the beetle dies. And very conveniently, because just the night before, the girl was saying that the daughter, Beetle's sister, was saying how she was sick of always having to take care of Gregor, and that they're better off without worrying about Gregor, and that they should throw him out. And just then Gregor dies. Cool, I guess. And then the following morning, the housekeeper says that they don't have to worry about the corpse of the beetle anymore. And I'm confused because it doesn't mean that she threw the corpse out, but I think that the family would have noticed if she threw the corpse of a massive beetle who used to be their son out the window, or whatever she did with it. Did she destroy it? Did it turn into a butterfly? Did it turn back into a human? Is it a ghost? Did it disappear? Did it get Thanos to dust? What happened to the beetle? I'm very confused about. And the family just doesn't care, and they are like, don't tell us what happened, and they leave to go on a tram. What? And also, this family, like, they have a 17-year-old daughter. How old could the parents be? How come they're not working anymore? I'm confused. Why do they expect their son to take care of all their whims when both parents are very capable of working? I'm very confused about that as well. Also, the sister's behavior was just so inconsistent. Like, at the beginning, she was crying because Gregor turned into a beetle. Then she did her best to clean his room and bring him food. And then she was mean towards him and wanted him to be gone and wouldn't even look at him. But then when your mother tried to clean the room and almost killed Gregor because of, I don't know, poisonous chemicals in the cleaning product, then she was really angry at her mother because she was supposed to take care of Gregor. And then in the end, she's the one that says that she's sick and tired of the beetle. And I'm like, my girl, make up your mind. Why are you so bipolar, inconsistent, jumping around conclusions? Why? Yeah, that also confused me. And just, I mean, I guess the whole idea, the concept is pretty interesting, but I was not the biggest fan of how it got resolved, the main conflict of the book. And overall, I decided to give it a 3 out of 5 star rating on Goodreads. And the last book that I read in February was The Cat Who Saved Book by Sasuke Natsukawa. This book I bought at the airport in Amsterdam as I was coming home for Christmas. And I don't know, how there's this trend of a ton of Japanese novels being translated into English, and they all feature cats in one way or another. And I hadn't read any of those yet, and that's one sounded less sad than others. It is about a boy dealing with his grandfather's death, but it's something less sad than others. I don't know why. And so I decided to pick it up and read it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It was really enjoyable. It's about this boy, Rintaro, and his grandfather dies one morning, and his grandfather was his only family. And he has, over the course of this book, with the help of a cat and the world of books and his classmate as well, he kind of processes the loss of his grandfather and works on accomplishing his grandfather's dreams of helping other people, standing up for the weak, and there was one other, whatever, don't hurt other people. His grandfather had this whole philosophy, and over the course of this book, through several labyrinth challenges where he has to save books, he learns about what his grandfather valued and acts in a way that would have made his grandfather really proud if he were still alive. And I don't know, it's really cozy and low stakes. It is fantasy. You have a talking cat as the main character, but on the other hand, it's very low stakes fantasy. Like, there are several instances where it's like you're gonna disappear if you're not ever going to return home again if you don't settle this conflict. But overall, it's pretty low stakes, and I don't know, I enjoyed it. It's very cozy, heartwarming. I feel like the romance that gets introduced at like the middle of the book was not that interesting to me. I didn't really ship the characters that much. I don't feel like they had that much chemistry and it felt a bit sudden. But other than that, I don't have much criticism for this book. It was pretty interesting. It had some nice life messages. It also discusses books in modern society and how, I don't know, for example, classics are not as appreciated, and society is much more likely to read, how should I describe this, lighter stories that don't make them think. There was a quote that I really liked. I don't remember it exactly. It's basically Rintaro and his classmate Sayo are talking about books because Sayo decided to ask her to recommend her books, and he gradually recommends her stuff. He starts with Jane Austen, then Flaubert, then Stendhal, and in the end he recommends her a book by Gabriel Garcia Marquez, 100 Years in Solitude, I think is the title. 100 Years of Solitude by Gabriel Garcia Marquez. And the first book she enjoyed. This one, she tells him that she doesn't understand and that it's very complicated. And he's like, well, that's good because that means it challenges you and that you learn something new out of it. If a book is easy to read, it doesn't challenge you and it might not be worth as much, even though it's enjoyable. And I just paused and thought about that because I myself for a while was kind of captivated by easier reads. They're quite popular these days, and I'm not saying that those books aren't great. Like, they all have their own focus and they all just, I don't know, are meant as entertainment in the end, and you can read a book to unwind. You're not forced to read a book that mentally challenges you all the time and that it takes you a month to finish because it's so complicated. You can also just enjoy reading and getting lost in a story that's really lighthearted or doesn't have so much discussion about psychology, philosophy, and whatnot. I find that really interesting because I feel like it's an interesting discussion to have about consumerism versus actually learning from books. I don't know, like, there are moments and moments. Some moments you need a highly philosophical, metaphorical book, and sometimes you just need an action-packed fantasy adventure. And I think that both is okay as long as you're aware of what each book is worth and is not. I don't know, just what I thought. But yeah, these were overall my thoughts about the Cat Who Saved Books. It was cozy, nice, 4 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed it. So this has been my wrap up for the month of February. I read 5 books. One more, I finished all of the books that I had to for the Naruto TBR challenge for the month of February, which I'm very happy about because this means that I can buy a new book. I decided to make that my reward. If I finished all the books for a month, I can buy a new book because I currently have way too many books that I have to read. So at least I have to read 4 of those books, or 4 books in general, to be able to buy a new book. And I did actually buy a new book last night. It was also partially because I found out that I passed all my exams, which I was really happy about because I was not sure about that. Yeah, those were all the books I read. I'm quite happy with them, and I enjoyed all of them in the end, to moderate degrees. I also found a new favorite. So yeah, overall, I'm really happy with everything I did in February. Hopefully next month will go just as well, even better. And stick around for more videos. I'll see you in another video. Bye!